Hello and welcome to this recording of Transformational Trails. In our discussions with pastors and sessions, we felt like it would be a good idea to produce a video that was something of a primer for sessions, for pastors, sessions, and congregations that might be interested in contacting Transformational Trails and engaging them in some meaningful fashion. So that's what this video is going to be about. We hope it's informative to you, and information to contact Lee and Aemina is in the video, so you'll be able to find it easily. So, Lee, what do people need to think about when they contact Transformational Trails?
Um, well, I think the first thing I want to say is that I think it takes courage to reach out, and it takes and and it's not easy. It's not easy to reach out, to look for help, ask for help, especially when you aren't exactly sure what you're going to get. And I think that's the purpose of these videos, is to introduce you to us, get you a little bit more familiar with our process. And um, but one thing I want to, I think, say up front, and you can correct me if I think Aemina fully agrees, but you can correct me, Aemina, if you don't think this is true. But we don't, just like going to see a doctor and saying like, "Hey doc, what are you going to do when I come in today?" The doctor's probably going to say, well, a good doctor anyway, will say, well, it totally depends on what the ailment is, right? And so I don't think that Aemina and I have a process and specific program to heal all ailments, all people, and it's a collaborative process. And so I think what you can expect when you first reach out to us, for whatever reason it is a lot of listening, and a lot of Aemina and I listening. Aemina just had a conversation with a pastor recently, and what she just said before we started this call was, "I did a lot of listening and note taking. Like, we have to take you in. How is this affecting you? How's this affecting your work and your congregation and the people you care about?" And I think we're trained to steadily listen to what's being said and what's not being said, and make sure we're aligning with you.
And part of that, Lee, I agree, is that the collaboration, trauma recovery is not prescriptive. It's not like other forms of therapy where you're going to do these things in exact order. To help people who have been traumatized requires us using all the tools in our basket and using them at different times, using them weighted differently. Like one person might need this and one person might need something else. So what Lee is saying about that collaboration is really important. And part of that is also, it's okay to say you don't know what you need either.
Mhm.
Because I think it's scary. I'm so glad, Lee, you started with that fear, because sometimes it's fearful to call somebody when you're like, I don't really know what I need, but I know I'm not okay. You don't have to know what you need, and we aren't going to know instantly either.
Mhm. Yeah, well said. Some of, so I just want to list really quickly just some very practical moments when your congregation, or you as an individual, or anyone in your congregation wants to reach out. And actually, before I list those four, I should mention that I think we are in agreement that it does not need to be pastors that reach out. It does not need to be leaders, quote unquote leaders in the church. Doesn't it could be anybody. And we're open to that. We want to be we are a ministry that is equal to the task, regardless of um, where the problem is being identified, whether it is among session leaders or it is among a lay person who's maybe more peripherally involved. We're open for those calls or contact. So one, there's been a trauma or tragedy and your church or community needs support. So to Amina's point, you don't know what is needed, but this doesn't feel good. There's been a local tragedy, a global tragedy, national one that's affecting you. It's affecting you as individuals, affecting your church. And you know that the support is needed, but you're not sure exactly what that support is. That might be a great time to reach out to us. If you're approaching an anniversary of a painful event, Aemina wrote this down, and I think that's really good to acknowledge. Anniversaries matter. Anniversaries of tragedies, of passings, anniversaries of they can be celebratory anniversaries that are now clouded with grief. Those are incredibly tender times. And if you just need some support around that, then please reach out to us. If your congregation is looking to become more trauma informed and you're ready to grow that ministry, I think, but that feels really exciting to me, that you can't maybe identify a particular thing that's hurting, but you want to be better prepared for when people are hurting. You want to feel more equipped for it. And so you want to build knowledge and resilience and resource and know-how as a church. That's really exciting. Like, you just want to prepare for it and become. When I first started ministry, someone said to me, the church is like a hospital for the spiritually sick. And I don't think the church is just that, but I really love that image. And if I'm to take that image seriously, then like, let's make sure the hospital's prepared to take in people that are really suffering and sick. And so maybe you just want to make sure that your docs, all of you doctors in the church ready to take care of the spiritually hurt, are continuing their education and growing. The last one, and then I feel like I'm talking a lot. Your own personal history with trauma, you haven't found the right resources. So I think the trauma absolutely can be, and we want to help when it's in the church, something has happened in the church or between members of the church. There are problems between members, there are disagreements, there's conflict, but we also show up with our own personal histories. And if we can support an individual that has a history of trauma and is ready to collaborate with us around it, then that might be another opportunity for somebody to reach out.
And I think to add to that, the when is also don't wait until everything blows up. Yeah. Don't wait until you're totally overwhelmed. Lee and I would much rather have you reach out and say, I just feel like things are getting a little, it just feels off. That's a good time to reach out, because by the time things blow up and they feel overwhelming, it takes a lot of energy to bring that energy back down versus being able to step in when you feel off. It just doesn't feel right. So please remember that it's okay. It may just be a check-in. You might be able to talk to Lee and 20 minutes later, you're like, okay, I have a better idea. And he's able to help you navigate. And there will be times that you discover that there's more, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Amina, that reminds me of how important it is to listen to our bodies and listen to our hearts. And like if something feels off or is painful,
Mhm.
back to the physical analogy of it being like a physical pain, like let's not wait until something bursts and we need an ambulance, right? Like if something's starting to feel off, like, oh, this hurts, let's not try to tough it out and prove to ourselves that we are tough people. I mean, and maybe it's like you said, maybe it's a conversation where it's just like, oh, it's not really that big a thing. It's not silly to reach out. Um, Getting in the practice of being vulnerable and reaching out when something is off, I think is a really good skill. So maybe it won't be a big deal, but it won't be a waste of our time.
Right.
Um,
Aemina, I'm thinking as I listen to the two of you talk that this doesn't necessarily have to be limited to the scope of just the congregation.
Right.
The community at large is also part of this. I've seen instances, I've been a part of instances where some unknown person just wanders in off the street and is looking for help of some kind. Uh, in some cases, they're looking for some form of physical help.
Mhm.
When is the food pantry open? Or hey, my relative's in the hospital and I need money for gas to go see them. So those are also incidents that might bear discussion, especially if after after it passes, there's still an unsettledness
Mhm.
about it all.
mm,
I think those are worthwhile conversations to have as well.
yeah, I really like where this is going because I think part of what I'm hearing us say is that we're trying, we want to invite everyone to be in the practice of giving attentiveness to that unsettledness,
Mhm.
which and maybe it doesn't need tons of attention, but like let's get in the practice of if something feels off, it could be just a Sunday morning service and there's new people that are there and new people have come on Sunday morning and they there was an exchange of words between people that has you feeling uncomfortable. Like what, like that I think is the spirit. That's paying attention to the spirit, the emotional, the mental, um just giving it that tender attention that we're not used to. We're kind of, I think most of us, myself included, are just used to kind of like going like next thing, next, like that doesn't need my attention. Let's move on to the next thing. So we're a ministry that I think wants to slow things down and say, no, let's look at it. Doesn't have to, we don't have to call it trauma. It very well might not be trauma, but by looking at it, by giving it our attention, we can make sure that it doesn't become trauma.
Yeah, we live in a culture where powering through is prized. And that is, I mean, we see it every single day. Those who power through are prized and respected, and those who say ouch are often marginalized. And that's not how I practice my faith. That's not how I practice my work with trauma. That's not how Lee does. That's not how Larry does. And that's not who we are. And there's no prize for you being miserable for months or years before you come forward. There's no prize for that. You are not valued more and you are not valued less. And so we want you to come forward when you need something, when the church needs something. There's no shame in saying something's not right.
I'm also thinking about systems within the worshiping community. In a couple of instances, I've counseled with sessions or congregations that seem to have some repetitive condition. And I recall one elder in particular, as I sat with him, he was so upset about it. He asked the question, why does this keep happening to us? So I think that's an opportunity to examine the systems of grief, or the systems of conflict, or the systems of power, or the systems of trauma that exist within a worshiping community. That's an opportunity to go a little deeper into that. And it's an incredibly valid question to ask.
Yeah, and the reality is that our systems are interconnected. I mean, right now in this Zoom call, there's three of us. So we each have a system. And so our systems on this call are affecting one another. If I'm showing up super happy or super sad or whatever, that has an effect. And then, as you can imagine, then let's say I'm the one coming with something and Lee and Larry are affected. And then they go home and their loved ones in the home are affected. And then their loved ones go to work or talk to a friend and they're affected. And before you know it, this ripple effect can go very far, very fast. And it's not that people are going to know what the instigating thing is. Because throughout the day, we interact with how many different systems? And we don't remember which one pushed us over. We don't always remember which one pushed us over the edge, but we have to remember that our impact on others has big ripples, big ripples. And so again, that ability to say something isn't right, as much as it's taking care of us, which is important, it's also taking care of other people to make sure that we aren't becoming dangerous ripples in other people's lives.
That's really brilliant. I think the a practical piece that I want to add to that, and this may sound a little bit prescriptive, is sometimes systems need to be mindful that it is a system, be aware of itself, and then be willing to interject new patterns, right? For instance, here's something that I was accused yesterday of being very silly. I went to a meeting full of adults to take on really big problems the organization was having, and I handed out index cards and I handed out colored scented pens, and I had them do an activity where they wrote down a number on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being they were feeling fine about everything that was going on. 10 was they were completely burnt out and over it. And then on the other side, they were to write a word, one word to distill or describe how this was affecting them. And then we passed them back in and went through them. And it felt a little silly. It felt playful, but it was me trying to invite all of us into creating a system where we care about how we're being affected by one another, and we're allowed to do it in a colorful way. We're allowed to do it in a playful way. We're allowed to do it in an unserious way. So if we know that we have these ripple effects and systems have these ripple effects, it might be that we keep repeating the same thing because we're stuck in a system habit, in a habitual system. And we need to be aware of that and that space needs healing. And we can invite that system to engage in very different behavior, like gratitude practices or meditation practices. I've tried and have failed several times at getting a serious group of like business leaders to sit down before a meeting and just close their eyes and take deep breaths together. We're so resistant to like doing anything that's different than what you were describing, Aemina. Like, no, we have tasks. Let's get serious about the problems, right? But what about just changing the system? What about interjecting peace, in a moment of peace, into the system? What ripple effects might that have? And then how might that change what we get back? So I'll stop there, but it makes me think about the way that worship is conducted every Sunday has ripple effects. Just the way it's conducted, how it's led, those are very tender decisions, and they're repetitive, ritualistic. Religion is very ritualistic. So are we engaged in the right rituals? Sorry, I feel like I said a mouthful and went in a couple different directions there.
I'm thinking about something Edwin Friedman said. He was a family systems therapist, and he said, playfulness will get you unstuck a lot faster than seriousness. So I think that's disrupting the system on occasion is a healthy thing to do. Even though we have been conditioned and formed in most cases to say it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
So many eye rolls when I pulled out those colored pens.
So one of the things we wanted to make sure we touched on today is that, let's say your session or congregation thinks that they want to move forward and engage with us. Sometimes people say, well, what do we have to do? Well, there's some homework, and there's going to be some work, and we want you to be prepared for that, because we want you to understand that this is not a top-down approach. Lee and I can't walk in there and literally give you a script and tell you, do this, and everything's going to be fine. Because you're bringing your own experiences, and the church has their own experiences as a unit, as a system. And within the church, there's all these other systems. You've got deacons, and you've got session, and you've got worship community, and you've got the knitting group, and you've got the Tuesday night group, and all these other things. And all of those things need to be looked at. So be prepared that if you do want to do some work, and I don't mean because there's a crisis, I mean because you're identifying that you want to maybe engage in trauma-informed care, and you want to do some intentional work with that, people are going to have to prepare individually. They're going to need to begin to think about and recognize their own issues and biases and their own coping mechanisms. And they need to be able to compete and audit of their own experiences. So we will be asking you to do that. And then once you've done some of that individual work, then as a group, you will need to be able to complete those audits as well. And then as a wider group, you'll need to create or complete those audits as well. Because what we are trying to do is we are trying to look at all of the different patterns and how are we going to make a woven structure that is safe. So if Lee and I both know that we're both super early morning people, which we are, so I'm using that as an example, who's going to be the late night person? We need to know, what are your coping mechanisms? If Lee's coping mechanism is to use colored pens and 3x5 cards, and my coping mechanism is to go outside, whose coping mechanism wins out? How do we discern that? And so these are really, really important conversations that we're going to be having with you. And part of this is we're going to ask you to be willing to be uncomfortable, to be willing to change, to be willing to be challenged, not in a harmful way, in a gentle way. Because to take care of traumatized people is not prescriptive. Just as Lee and I will be thinking on our feet and looking at all of the things that we have learned and studied if we are working with a traumatized group of people or a traumatized individual, when churches want to do this work, they're going to have to do that as well. And the only way we learn to think on our feet is by actually doing it, is by going in and having those experiences ourselves. And one thing that we also want to really highlight is that sometimes churches will say, we really want to do this. And like Lee said, it's exciting and we get excited. I have never met a church yet, and I'm guessing Lee and Larry are going to agree with me, where if you have 100 people, 100 people all stand up and say, yeah, we want to do this. That is, I'm going to call, yeah, that's stink. That's crap. It's just never going to happen. There's going to be people who might say yes because they support the mission, but they don't want to be involved. It's not their comfort zone. So the other question is, how are we going to do this work in a way that makes sure that the people who don't really want to do it aren't overlooked? They aren't sidelined. They aren't marginalized. They aren't run over. So it takes a lot of creative energy. So some pastors have said to Larry, what do we need to know if we're going to do this? And it's hard because Lee and I we want you to stay excited about this, but we want you to be prepared. We want you to be prepared for the fact that there is work that goes into building and creating a trauma-informed community, trauma-informed worship, trauma-informed direct care, whatever that is. And we're going to be with you. We will be with you through the whole thing. But be prepared that there's going to be a little bit of bumps and challenge. And Lee and I are challenged every time we do this work. At least I've never walked out and been like, nobody asked me anything that I was uncomfortable with. That's just not the way it works. And so we have to be vulnerable with you just as you have to be vulnerable with us. And we're willing to do that.
Yeah, I think part of what I'm hearing you say, Aemina, is you're inviting people into this kind of messy, gritty process, and where there's unknowns, and we're going to try to invite everyone to be feel as safe and we're going to try to hold, but this isn't a touchy-feely process. It does involve grit, and it does involve not feeling great, and you're in good company. I think Aemina and I have made a living. have maybe because we have our own issues, or maybe we just yeah, this is the challenge of our work, is to be in the grit, and to be in the tough parts, and to face some resistance. I think part of what Aemina was saying was like, we'll go into churches, or we'll go into family systems, we'll go into hospitals, and people are like, yeah, help me, but don't help me like that. And we're used to, yeah, that's part of our work. That's part of our work, is to work with systems that do want to change, but don't want to change.
Yeah, because I think so often in any organization, when you want to do a new program, you want to buy the book and you want to do it. So, and you want it to make sense and be easy. Well, I'm going to open a food pantry, or I'm going to build one of those structures that we put out front of the church where people just put food in and anyone can come and get it. That is a wonderful, awesome opportunity. Trauma-informed care is not that easy. And Lee and I have talked about this. Larry and Lee and I have talked about this. We want you to be prepared, not scared, prepared that to do this work is going to require some difficult questions and some difficult conversations. Because the worst thing that for us that would happen is someone calls us and says, wow, we're really excited. We want to do this. And we show up and say, okay, let's start thinking about this. And we start asking people to do self audits or talk about their coping mechanisms. And everybody goes, well, it's not about me. It's about that person coming in the door. It's about the person coming in the door. It's about the thing that's happening in our church or community. But it's about us because we are the ones responding. So we need to be sure that we know how we are responding and how we show up. So we just want people to be prepared.
It could be about the grief or pain that has gone ignored and untalked about for a long time. But the healing that can occur on the other side of that is too wonderful to let it go.
Yep.
This is how, as I see it, worshiping communities become vibrant and flourishing, and able to do good work in the communities where they're placed. Because Lee, you talked early on about being sensitive, becoming aware. This is how that takes place. It's difficult at times, but the rewards on the other side of it, I think, are just wonderful to contemplate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the hope for a transformation that is really rewarding and joyful is a goal that I kind of hold and keep in mind.
Yeah. Friends, we're at the end of our time. So this has been a really rich conversation. Thank you. And once again, the contact information for Lee and Aemina is in the video. So you are welcome to reach out to them for anything you might wish to converse with them about. So, until next time, be safe, be well.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.
You.